So good evening, everybody. I am Dr. Yogesh Sharwani from Noble Gastro Hospital, Ahmedabad. And on behalf of Ahmedabad Physician Association, I welcome all of you to 8th Clinic of Advanced Gastro Summit 2020. So before beginning this, I would like to thank mentor and course director Dr. Mahesh Goenka to give us permission to conduct this event. I would like to thank Gujarat State Chapter of ASI, Gujarat State Surgeons Association, Association of Physicians of Gujarat and Ahmedabad, Association of Ahmedabad Surgeons and Gujarat State Family Physician Forum to contribute in this Advanced Gastro Summit. I am pleased to have Dr. Sandeep Pal today as a speaker. I am also pleased and we are honored to have Dr. Pathik Parikh, who is an hepatologist and liver transplant physician at Zydus Hospital, Ahmedabad. He is very enthusiastic doctor and is also contributing academically to development of field of hepatology. So Dr. Pathik Parikh, thank you for accepting my invitation. And please introduce today's chairperson, and then chairperson will introduce Dr. Sandeep Pal.
Good evening, everybody. At the onset, I'll congratulate Dr. Harwani for carrying out and conducting such sessions in a very professional way, and it is being helping a lot of individuals. So today's talk is on stepwise management of alcoholic hepatitis by Dr. Sandeep. And to chair the session, we have Dr. Jignesh Patel, a senior gastroenterologist from Ahmedabad, who would be chairing the session. And I'll pass on the session to you, Dr. Jignesh.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. As we know, our today's speaker is Dr. Sandeep Pal. He is a consultant gastroenterologist at Narayana Hospital, Kolkata. He is very dynamic and expert in endoscopic intervention procedures as well as hepatology. He is also a founder of Endoscopy Club in Kolkata. He has delivered various talks in various national conferences, online as well as offline. Now it's our honor to he is with us today, and without wasting the time, I will request Dr. Sandeep Pal to start the lecture on very interesting topic of severe alcoholic hepatitis, which is always a diagnostic as well as treatment dilemma in our gastroenterologist practice. So over to Dr. Sandeep Pal.
I would welcome Dr. Ashwin Gadvi also. He is president of our association. He has also joined us today.
Dr. Ashwin Gadvi joined.
Please, Sandeep, you can continue.
So I have shared my screen. Is it visible? Is it visible screen? And I'm audible too, right? Okay. So first of all, good evening, everyone. I would take this opportunity to thank Dr. Yogesh Sharwani, who has been a long-time friend for this opportunity, and would also like to thank Dr. Jignesh Patel for the kind introduction and Dr. Pathik. So today, the topic of discussion is stepwise management of alcoholic hepatitis. So to start the talk, now we are all aware of alcohol being a very significant, has got a significant contribution to our diseases of the gastrointestinal system, be it pancreas, acute pancreatitis, or alcoholic liver disease. So worldwide, the harmful use of alcohol is associated with almost 3.3 million deaths every year, and 5.9% of all deaths are due to alcohol-related disease. And almost it can cause more than 200 diseases. And most deaths attributable to alcohol consumption are from cardiovascular diseases, injuries, GI diseases, mainly cirrhosis, and cancers. So alcohol use disorders, the medical management of alcohol use disorders in patients with alcoholic liver disease, if you look at the graph, so if someone has been actively drinking and if someone is abstinent from alcohol, you can see the difference in the survival probability. So if it is an early compensated liver disease, someone who is abstinent and someone who is not abstinent, there is a clear-cut survival advantage, be it in compensated liver disease or in decompensated liver disease. Now, for this group of patients who have alcohol use disorder, there are various drugs that we can use for de-addiction, though it's not always we do that. We always refer these patients to our psychiatrists. But there are one or two drugs which we can use too as gastroenterologists And what out of them, the most common is baclofen, which we gastroenterologists have a fair deal good idea about baclofen. So for these patients, we can prescribe baclofen. In my patients, I usually prescribe baclofen, but when it comes to naltrexone or nalmefene or disulfiram, you usually refer to the psychiatrist. I think most of us do that. We don't usually prescribe disulfiram or the other drugs, but baclofen we can do. Now, this is a study of the use of randomized controlled trial of baclofen versus placebo in 84 alcoholic cirrhosis. And you can see the proportion of maintaining abstinence at 12 weeks. There is a clear-cut advantage when you compare with placebo. In baclofen, if you use in these patients, there is almost 71% they remain abstinent. So now, because my talk is on management of alcohol hepatitis, so to understand the management of alcoholic hepatitis, it's very important to know the pathogenesis of alcoholic hepatitis, because most of the treatments of alcoholic liver disease depends on the management, on the pathogenesis. If we know the pathogenesis, like how the disease is occurring, which cytokines are involved, then it is easier to formulate the drugs. Now, if someone takes chronic alcohol, the pathways that are involved in development of liver disease are, if you see the metabolism of alcohol, there is production of acetaldehyde, acetate, then there is this various production of reactive oxygen species, reactive nitrogen species, and the free radicals which injure the liver. And be it any mechanism, whether it is alcoholic liver disease or non-alcoholic liver disease, the mechanism of injury is lipid peroxidation and production of free radicals. So this is a little bit cumbersome. I'm not going into the details of this, but there are various, it's not a single entity. There are so many mechanisms like dysbiosis, the altered alcoholic metabolism, there are enzyme polymorphisms, then whether there is background, any insulin resistance, malnutrition, and altered immune response. So many things are important for the pathogenesis of alcoholic liver disease. Now, when mechanism of alcohol-induced liver injury, this can cause injury by two mechanisms. One is direct injury by alcohol and its metabolites like acetaldehyde, or it can be indirect injury like the recruitment of immunoinflammatory system. I will come to that with the involvement of microbiota and leaky gut. So as we know, when someone takes chronically alcohol intake users, they have a altered microbiota, and also it can produce to leaky gut, which leads to synthesis of lipopolysaccharides, and this initiates the pathogenetic mechanism. Now, this is the cycle. This is how alcohol is metabolized in the body. So when someone takes ethanol, it's usually metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase to acetaldehyde. And this is the normal usual pathway, but when someone takes excess of alcohol, this path is overwhelmed, and most of the alcohol is then metabolized by the cytochrome P450 pathway to E1, and it produces acetaldehyde. Now, when ethanol is metabolized by this cytochrome P450 pathway, there is a lot of production of reactive oxygen species and free radicals, which causes injury to the liver. Now, alcohol, as we know, it can produce endoplasmic reticulum stress or oxidative stress, and it can affect the intestine and produce a leaky gut and production of lipopolysaccharides. All these can cause hepatocyte injury. From when the hepatocytes are injured, there are production of DAMs and PAMs. This is the damage-associated molecular patterns and pathogen-associated molecular patterns. And the vesicles, various extracellular vesicles, they in turn stimulate the Kupffer cell, and the Kupffer cells, when they are stimulated, they produce various inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha, interleukin-1, interleukin-6, which in turn causes amplification of inflammatory response and injury. So this is the pathogenesis and the mechanism of liver injury. Now, coming to the natural history of liver disease, alcoholic liver disease. Now, when there is a normal liver, if someone takes excess of alcohol, that is, if it is more than 60 gram alcohol daily for 2 weeks continuously, then it is sufficient to produce fatty liver, which is the histological pattern of steatosis, out of which 20 to 40% usually develop fibrosis, and around 10 to 35% may develop steatohepatitis. If you see the histology here, steatohepatitis means the recruitment of neutrophils and the inflammatory cells. Fibrosis means this is fine reticulin framework, meshwork, you can see, which causes fibrosis of the liver. And around more than 75% of patients who develop steatohepatitis, they can develop cirrhosis. And once the patient develops cirrhosis, the patient might decompensate and develop the various clinical manifestations of cirrhosis. And around 10%, 3 to 10% of patients can develop hepatocellular carcinoma. So this is the natural history of alcohol-associated liver disease, the fate of alcohol, excessive intake of alcohol. Now, if we talk about the pathogenesis, the stepwise management of alcoholic liver disease, there are 6 steps I will describe, out of which the first step is diagnosis of alcoholic hepatitis. So there is some criteria for diagnosis of alcoholic hepatitis. Like if someone takes alcohol in excess of 60 grams for male and 40 grams for female, with less than 60 days of abstinence, and for more than 6 months intake, with AST and ALT in between, hovering between 50 to 400, with AST ALT ratio of 0.1 more than 1.5, with a total bilirubin of 3 milligram per deciliter, then it is usually sufficient to diagnose alcoholic liver disease. Now, liver biopsy is rarely required if you get the definite history and AST, ALT values, AST more than ALT, then it is sufficient to diagnose alcoholic liver disease. But there are certain troubleshooters, like sometimes we come across female patients who deny alcohol intake instead of repeated asking. And if your clinical features fit into alcoholic liver disease, sometimes we have to get the diagnosis, we need to do liver biopsy. Otherwise, basically, it's to exclude other causes rather than confirming the diagnosis of alcoholic liver disease. Now, so the step 1 is to diagnose alcoholic hepatitis. So when you do an LFT, we get abnormal values of GGT, ALT, AST in the pattern which I have described. Plus, we can do an elastography, you find liver fibrosis, or you can do an ultrasonography to see if the patient has developed cirrhosis. And usually all patients who come with jaundice, it is a routine investigation to rule out hepatitis B, C, the autoimmune markers, alpha-1 antitrypsin and transferrin. This we don't do in our daily practice. This is only for the theoretical part, but usually we'll do the autoimmune markers and the hepatitis B and C in that group of patient in which the diagnosis is little bit of dilemma is there. And otherwise same LFT reports, and we can do an endoscopy if the patient develops, if the patient is already cirrhotic, to assess the variceal status. So as I said, liver biopsy is used only to establish definite diagnosis of ALD rather than when you have a dilemma with other differential diagnosis and to rule out other diseases. So this is the 3 patterns in histology of, if you do a biopsy of this patient, these are the 3 different patterns you can see. One is alcoholic steatosis, one is alcoholic steatohepatitis, another is alcoholic fibrosis and cirrhosis. I'm not going into the details of this. Okay, now these are the invasive. So liver biopsy is invasive. So if you don't want to see all patients, it is difficult to do a liver biopsy. Nowadays, there are very good non-invasive markers by which you can diagnose liver fibrosis or cirrhosis, out of which one is hyaluronic acid, then this fibro test, fibrometer, FIB-4. So more of theoretical concern, we usually don't do this. Just to complete the list, I have mentioned this. And this is about the liver stiffness measurement. We all know this. We all are aware of liver stiffness measurement by elastography. So accordingly, less than 6 is normal, 6 to 8 is gray zone, 8 to 12.5 is F3 fibrosis, more than 12.5 is F4 fibrosis. This one usually, if someone has got already in ultrasonography features of chronic liver disease, then we need not do elastography. But in that group of patient where the ultrasound does not show cirrhosis and the patient has got LFT abnormality, to see whether the patient has developed fibrosis or not, we can do this test. This one already I have discussed. Okay, so the diagnosis, one is clinical, one is histological, and another is laboratory. Laboratory, we have already described this. I'll skip these slides. Now this is the step 1 is diagnosis. The step 2 is the assessment of severity of alcoholic hepatitis. This is very important. So if from the time immemorial, from when we have been, there are few markers which have been used from the time immemorial, means from the time when we have been into hepatology, we have heard of this Madrid's discriminant function. So this is a score which uses bilirubin and the INR, that is 4 into difference of INR, the PT prothrombin time between control and the patient, plus total bilirubin. So this is a very good marker. If it is more than 32, then it usually signifies severe alcoholic hepatitis. Then there is the MELD score. MELD score more than 20 has got a high risk 90-day mortality. Then there are other scores like the Glasgow score, then the EBIC score, and there is a Lilly model. Lilly model is another one which is a very important score to give us the treatment, whether which patient should be continued on corticosteroids. I will come to that in detail. So this is another important score called Lilly score, which we use in the treatment of alcoholic hepatitis. So this is step 2, and the step 3. The step 3 is to differentiate from ACLF. Now, why it is important to differentiate from ACLF? It's important because ACLF is a condition like acute on chronic liver failure. This is a condition where usually the patient will require transplant. If we have to very well differentiate between alcoholic hepatitis and ACLF, because the treatment management is completely different. We cannot give steroids to a patient who has got ACLF because the consequences will be very bad in those group of patients. Now, which patients have ACLF? Now, this is a puzzle definition of ACLF. By Sarin et al. This is an acute hepatic insult manifesting as jaundice, usually bilirubin more than 5 and coagulopathy more than 1.5, complicated within 4 weeks by clinical ascites and or encephalopathy in a patient with previously diagnosed or undiagnosed chronic liver disease cirrhosis and is associated with a high 28-day mortality. Now, why it is important to know ACLF? Because now, how do you, sometimes it is very difficult clinically to distinguish between alcoholic hepatitis and ACLF. So what I would suggest in this group of patients where we have difficulty in diagnosis, we would like to do a CT scan of the abdomen. In CT scan of the abdomen, if a patient has got alcoholic hepatitis, usually the liver will be large size and enlarged congested liver. Whereas in a patient with ACLF, usually the liver is small in size. The liver is cirrhotic along with ascites. Alcoholic hepatitis also might have ascites. Basically, this differentiation is important for the treatment purpose. Now, coming to the treatment proper, step 4 is the treatment. Now, treatment we can classify into 2 groups: mild to moderate disease and severe disease. Now, mild to moderate disease we can get away by abstinence of alcohol, as I showed in that Kaplan-Meier analysis in the initial slides, and also with general measures. But in severe disease, we need to give some drugs. Usually we give some drugs, which I will come to in the subsequent slides. Now, management of alcoholic hepatitis, general measures, abstinence is the cornerstone. Then usually these patients might develop Wernicke's encephalopathy, so thiamine supplementation is very important. Then if the patients have hepatic encephalopathy, you have to treat that with lactulose, rifaximin, treatment of ascites with salt restriction or diuretics if the renal function permits, and prevention of renal failure with avoidance of diuretics, volume expansion, and use of beta blockers might increase the risk of acute kidney injury. So we have to balance according to the patient's condition. Now, one of the most important management of alcoholic hepatitis is nutrition. Now, these patients have to be maintained have to be given a very good nutrition, and the calorie intake should be around 35 to 40 kilocalorie per kg of body weight, with protein intake of 1.2 to 1.5 gram per kg of body weight. This is as per the guidelines of EASL. And if the patient is unable to eat orally, sometimes use of tube feeding is strongly recommended in these patients if they are unable to take orally. So this is a trial of European multicentral trial of around 136 patients with alcoholic hepatitis, in which there was intensive tube-based enteral nutrition versus conventional feeding, in addition to methylprednisolone in all the patients. There was no difference in mortality in this group of patients who were given intensive tube feeding or conventional feeding. But this study showed that those patients who received a calorie intake of less than 21.5 kilocalorie per day had a higher mortality, 65.8% versus 33.1%. So the patient has to be maintained on a good calorie intake. But again, this study has shown that the intensive tube feeding, sometimes these patients, because if their mentation is not good, have hepatic encephalopathy, and we give intensive tube feeding, sometimes these patients might aspirate and the outcome may not be as good. Now, coming to the most important controversial topic, which many of us, we have treated alcoholic hepatitis with corticosteroids. We have burnt our fingers also while treating with corticosteroids, like which patients to give steroids, which patients not to give. So there are clear-cut guidelines, yet the response has not been very good. So now if we see the list of meta-analysis, there are so many meta-analysis for the use of corticosteroids in alcoholic hepatitis. And if you see the survival advantage, yes, no, yes, no, yes. So whenever there with a drug, if there are so many, so much of yes, no, whether to give or not give, or that means we can infer that the treatment is not very robust. So we have to be very careful when treating patients with corticosteroids. Now, if you see this, again, another meta-analysis of the role of corticosteroids in alcoholic hepatitis, in these patients, all trials have shown that there is a survival advantage with the use of steroids in patients with hepatic encephalopathy and when GI bleed is excluded. If the GI bleed is not excluded, then the survival advantage is not there. And most of the studies showed that the survival advantage is short duration, that is a 30-day survival advantage. If you see 6-month survival advantage, there is not of much difference when the patients are treated with steroids or not. Now, coming to Lilly model, the Lilly model is the scoring system which helps us like which patients to give steroid and which patients not to give steroids. Now, this is a model which has been tested in a cohort of 320 patients with severe alcoholic hepatitis, that means a DF score of more than 32. Usually, this is a scoring which involves age, renal creatinine, albumin, prothrombin time, bilirubin, and bilirubin at day 7. And if we use this model and we get a score, like if you type in Google, you will get this Lilly model score, and there is a calculator where if you enter the values, you will get the score. And if the Lilly score is less than 0.45, then you can see by this figure that the Kaplan-Meier analysis, there is a clear-cut survival advantage when these patients have got a Lilly score less than 0.45, rather than when the Lilly score is more than 0.45, the p-value is significant. 6-month survival probability. Also, there is a meta-analysis of 5 RCTs comparing steroids with other drugs. If we see here, when the patients had a Lilly score, if the patient treated in the corticosteroid group had a clear-cut survival advantage when compared with the non-corticosteroid group. And also this Lilly model and survival, this Kaplan-Meier analysis shows if the Lilly score is less than 0.16, then the survival is up to the tune of 90%. And when the Lilly score is more than 0.56, it is 53%. So clear cut, so whichever patient, whoever we give corticosteroids in alcoholic hepatitis, the Lilly score has to be done to decide whether the steroid should be given or not. So usually the dose of steroids that we use is this group of patients, we use start the steroids at 40 milligram per day, and we give it for 7 days. And at 7 days, we calculate the Lilly score. If the Lilly score is less than 0.45, we continue it for 28 days at the 40 milligram per day, then taper it over next 15 days. And if the Lilly score is more, then we stop it at 7 days. Then coming to the next drug, that is pentoxifylline. Now, in those group of patients where steroids cannot be given, like those group of patients where there is a GI bleed or the creatinine is high, then this is a group of drug, pentoxifylline, which is a phosphodiesterase inhibitor. This drug can be used, it's a TNF inhibitor. So 5 trials of 336 patients, pentoxifylline reduced short-term mortality. But these trials are not very good. 4 of these studies had a very high risk of bias. There is no benefit in trial sequential analysis, and there is an increase in adverse events. So not a very good drug, but in those group of patients where steroids cannot be given, because this is the side effect profile is not that bad, we can think of using pentoxifylline. So this is a RCT which showed survival advantage, 1 month mortality of in patients who received pentoxifylline in comparison to standard medical therapy. But the later on trials were not as good. So next, coming to another landmark trial called STOPA trial, that is steroid or pentoxifylline in alcoholic hepatitis. Now this is a double-blind placebo-controlled trial of around more than 1,000 patients in 65 UK centers. Patients included were of alcoholic hepatitis with DF score more than 32, bilirubin more than 4.7. So there are 4 arms in this study. One was placebo plus placebo, one was prednisolone placebo, another is pentoxifylline placebo, and prednisolone pentoxifylline. Now, if you see the 28 days mortality, the group which received prednisolone plus placebo in comparison to placebo, there is a survival advantage. But there is no survival advantage in the group which received pentoxifylline. But the group which received again prednisolone plus pentoxifenone has got a survival advantage, but not very good results. So the 28-day mortality, they have got a survival advantage. But when you come to 6 months mortality, there was nothing significant. So this one you can see that this graph. So there was almost as the number of days increases with treatment, there is no survival advantage of any of the drugs, prednisolone versus pentoxifenone or prednisolone plus pentoxifenone. So these were the conclusions of STOPA trial. So there is no effect on 6 months survival, no role of combination of corticosteroid plus pentoxifenone. This was another steroid pentoxifenone meta-analysis. This again showed that when you give steroid, there is a 28-day mortality benefit versus controls or versus pentoxifenone, but the long-term mortality benefit is not there. So these are the management of alcoholic corticosteroid. These are the recommendations of EASL group. We have already discussed this. I'll skip this slide. And okay, so when these patients were treated with steroids, we should be very aware, we should be very vigilant to rule out infection, because if these patients have infection and if we give steroids, the outcome is not going to be good. So before starting steroids in any patients of alcoholic hepatitis, we have to do a systemic screening to rule out infection. So now, so these are the drugs which can be used for management of alcoholic hepatitis. So this is the algorithm which you will find in most of the books. If we and we follow this, if a patient has got a clinical diagnosis of alcoholic hepatitis, first we have to look whether the patient has alcohol dependence, and accordingly we can treat. The general measures that I have described, you can treat with that. General measures which should be given for all patients. Screen out infection. And disease, then we calculate the disease severity with the MADRS discriminant function. If it is more than 32, prednisolone can be used. Assess the response at day 7 by Lilly score. If the Lilly score is favorable, we continue it for 28 days. If the Lilly score is not favorable, stop treatment. And those group of patients should be sent to liver transplantation. And if the MADRS discriminant function is less than 32, no specific therapy required, we can continue with abstinence and the general management. Now coming to liver transplantation, this is for the non-responders, that is in whom the Lilly score is more than 0.45. Now this was one of the earliest studies by Mathurin et al. I think around 2012, this study came, though with a very less number of patients, only 26 patients with a mean Lilly score of 0.88 were taken up for liver transplantation as early as within 13 days of admission. And they showed that the 6-month survival advantage was definitely there between the group which received transplantation in comparison to the group which did not receive liver transplantation. You can see the survival advantage was 70% in the group at 6 months who received liver transplantation, whereas it was in 23% only in those group which did not receive liver transplantation. Subsequently, there was a bigger trial from the US, which was Accelerate AH trial, where the number of around 147 patients by Lee et al. Published in 2018 was the first episode of alcoholic hepatitis abstinence. But here they took patients who have been abstinent for median of 55 days. Median Lilly score was 0.82 and median MELD was 13. And here also you can see there was a 1-year survival was around 94% and 3-year survival of 84% for those patients who underwent liver transplantation. But here the liver transplantation was after a median abstinence of 55 days. So now the question comes whether to wait for the patient for 6 months before doing a liver transplantation, or 3 months, or do an upfront transplantation. So there is always this debate, but this Mathurin study had shown that if you do transplantation at an early stage also, there is a survival advantage. So this is again, this is another study which showed the 5-year survival in patients with alcoholic cirrhosis, liver transplanted versus non-transplanted. And here this shows that only those group of patients who have child C liver disease, that means advanced liver disease, if we treat them with transplantation, there is a survival advantage, rather than those group of patients which are in child A or child B. So the end point of here is, if the patient has got a child A or child B, you can wait, treat conservatively. But if the patient has got a child C cirrhosis, transplantation has to be done. If you do transplantation, the outcome is better. So this is the selection of patients for liver transplantation we have discussed. These are the recommendations of the EASL group. When those patients who have been mailed more than 15, they can be listed for transplant. 6-month criteria, again, debate is there whether to wait for 6 months or to do upfront transplantation. And duration of abstinence, because there is problem of recidivism. Most of these patients in some studies have been shown that after you do the transplant, they go back to drinking. So this is a difficult problem, so that we have to address, keep in mind before listing these patients. And abstinence in patients with alcohol disorder and liver transplant waiting list should be confirmed with regular clinical interviews and laboratory tests, and a balanced decision has to be taken. So liver transplantation, post-liver transplantation follow-up and management, if the relapse, so this Kaplan-Meier, if you see, so if someone who has been taking excess alcohol after transplantation, the survival advantage is poor, rather than in comparison to the patient who has been abstinent. Now, this was about liver transplantation. Coming to the final step, that is the step 6, that is a novel treatment for patients who do not have any other options, who cannot be taken up for transplant, who cannot be given steroids. So what do you do? So there are some treatments which you can give in this, offered to this group of patients. Out of which one is probiotics, that I will come to a figure later where it shows the leaky gut. We have already seen that alcohol can cause leaky gut. So in this group of patients, probiotics have got a definite advantage. And also there are studies to show that in alcoholic patients, 4-week probiotics, Bifidobacterium or Lactobacillus improve and normalize neutrophil phagocytic capacity and decrease the endotoxin stimulated levels of TNF receptor 1 or TNF receptor 2 and interleukin 10. Also, rifaximin also has got a survival, so rifaximin can be helpful in this group of patients who have low systemic absorption and broad spectrum activity against GI tract microorganisms. And there are studies to show that 28-day course of rifaximin has been shown to decrease serum endotoxin levels in both systemic and splanchnic circulation. So now coming to another, we all have come to, heard of this study from ILBS by Dr. Sarin et al. About the role of GCSF. Now, what GCSF does is it causes mobilization of bone marrow derived stem cells, causes these hepatocyte stem cells to home to the liver, and which can cause hepatocyte regeneration and recovery from ACLF. Now, this was a study by Garg et al. Published in 2012, where they showed the group of patients who have been given the GCSF. This is the CD34 cells pre-therapy and after therapy. This is 30%, and after therapy with GCSF, this CD34 cells increases up to 70%. So this was a study by Singh et al. Published in American Journal of Gastroenterology in 2014, where 46 patients with severe alcoholic hepatitis, GCSF was given in the dose of 5 microgram per kg twice daily for 5 days, and in comparison to standard medical therapy. And there have been shown that the 3-month survival, there was a clear-cut survival advantage when compared with standard medical therapy. Now, coming to antioxidants, there are a lot of trials with antioxidants. One of them is N-acetylcysteine. So I'll come to, this is a study by N-acetylcysteine. So it is a free radical scavenging antioxidant, and it has got anti-inflammatory effects. So this was a study of 174 patients with severe alcoholic hepatitis. So one group was given prednisolone plus NAC, another group was given only prednisolone, and the group which received prednisolone plus NAC has got a clear-cut advantage, survival advantage at 1 month mortality, but there was no difference on 3-month mortality. Also, the death due to HRS was less in the group which received prednisolone plus NAC. Because NAC, as we know, it is an antioxidant. It can prevent deleterious effects on the kidneys, and it has got a clear-cut advantage when the patient has got HRS. Now, there are also a few studies with FMT, that is fecal microbiota transplantation. Now, alcohol causes leaky gut, as we have showed. So when there is excess alcohol intake, there is there is injury to the endothelium, and there is production of endotoxins. There is a disruption of tight junctions, and there is bacteria, and the bacterial products are all translocated into the portal vein, and bacterial translocation, that is production of pro-inflammatory cytokines from the Kupffer cells. We have all discussed this. So in this group of patients, there was a study, though very less number of patients, only 8 patients with severe alcoholic hepatitis, There was daily infusion of donor feces through NJ tube for 7 days, and this they have showed that there is a clear-cut survival advantage. But I want to caution you that this is a very small study, only 8 patients. We cannot infer anything from this, and also there has been morbidity, mortality also after giving patients about this treatment, fecal macrobiota transplant. So we have to be very careful about this. So these are only initial studies. We need more robust studies. We need RCTs before thinking of this as a treatment modality. Now, the talk will not be over without describing these molecules like UDCA, then SAMI, acetylmethionine, methodoxin. Now, all of us, we have seen as a practitioner, everyone prescribing ursodeoxycholic acid in patients of hepatitis, be it alcoholic hepatitis, be it non-alcoholic hepatitis, but there are no studies to prove that ursodeoxycholic acid have any protective action. Same with SAMI, there are Cochrane analysis which has shown that acetylmethionine has got no role in the treatment of alcoholic hepatitis. And coming to methodoxin, there is a study with methodoxin published in the World Journal of Gastroenterology in 2015, which showed that the group of patients who received methodoxin has got a advantage over the group which did not receive methodoxin for maintenance of remission. So methodoxin, again, it's an antioxidant. So these are the drugs used or studied for the treatment of alcohol-associated hepatitis, not effective anabolic steroids, antioxidants, colchicine, lecithin, propylthiouracil, acetylmethionine. Currently used glucocorticoids and pentoxifylline, and there are a lot of drugs under investigations like antibiotics, anti-endotoxins, cytokine inhibitors, FXR agonists. There is an ongoing trial with FXR agonists in the group of alcoholic liver disease also. Let's wait for those results. Then inhibitors of cell death, prebiotics, probiotics, and stimulators of regeneration. So these are the drugs which are under investigation. So ladies and gentlemen, to conclude my talk, the burden of alcoholic hepatitis is on the rise, and the proportion of patients with alcoholic hepatitis is rapidly increasing with better treatment options of viral liver diseases. The morbidity, mortality, and the treatment options for the management of alcoholic hepatitis have not significantly changed in the last many decades. A better and a newer treatment options for alcoholic hepatitis are the need of the hour. Thank you. Thank you for your patient hearing. I will be happy to take if there are any questions.
Thank you, Sandeep. It is very excellent and very nice talk. One question from my side is, what is the role of L-glutathione?
Yeah, so again, the same thing, L-glutathione is an antioxidant. So as we know, if we give acetylmethionine, the theory was that if we give acetylmethionine, that replenishes the glutathione stored in the body. But again, the Cochrane analysis and all the studies, there was an initial study, I think Mato trial, something was there, like many years back, 4 or 5 years, which showed that there was an advantage of SAMI, but the subsequent studies have failed to show any survival advantage or any benefit of acetylmethionine. So similarly, glutathione, as I think the same thing, that we don't have papers to say, but theoretically you can say it is an antioxidant. If there is glutathione, there will be, but there are not studies to prove that.
Sandeep, you had mentioned that you would prefer to do a CT scan in those patients in whom you want to differentiate between ACLF and ALF.
Yeah.
But CT, we have to give contrast and everything. So USG is also better. I think in that also we can definitely see hepatomegaly and or cirrhotic liver.
Yes, yes. Definitely, only if the conditions permit, we will do a CT liver, because that, see, it's very important to differentiate this group of patients. Suppose if we're not able to differentiate ACLF from AH, and you imagine if someone starts steroids, what will happen to them? So the main entity, so if the patient has got ACLF, there is no other thinking, no drugs, you have to release the patient for transplant. Yeah, if condition permits, then only we'll do CT abdomen. Otherwise, ultrasound, if it can tell us, then it's okay, good.
Okay, but I think a plain CT would also suffice, because
yeah,
telling exactly. us that there is a shrunken liver, it sets that we need to start thinking about the future rather than trying with the drugs. Yeah, so there are questions in the chat box as well. So I'll start with a question which, can we give steroids if the patient has ascites? So if MDF is more than 32 and there is presence of ascites, would you consider giving steroids? And would you tap before giving steroids?
Yeah. So first of all, if someone has got ascites, we have to rule out SBP. We have to rule out infection. If the patient is not a bleeder, and if the patient does not have if the patient does not have kidney injury, these are the only three contraindications when we don't give steroids. Otherwise, if there is ascites and if there is no SBP, steroids can be tried.
Just to start with a lower dose, or would you consider full dose 40? Because what we do is start with a half dose in these patients, or because 40 milligram in these patients, I think a lot of patients do develop SBP after.
Yeah, those individual considerations you can think of according patient to patient, but the studies are all with 40 milligram. So we don't have studies to say that we can give half dose and all. So that individual, like if the patient has got some complications, then we can do according to that. But all the studies are with 40 milligram.
One more question is from Dr. Manish Tiwari. Is there any role of plasmapheresis in patients of severe AH with ACLF who are actually awaiting liver transplant?
Yeah, so plasmapheresis, low volume plasmapheresis, we have been doing for those patients who have very high bilirubin, say. So, and if you think that the bilirubin has got very toxic effects, the patient is suffering from very high bilirubin, you can do a plasmapheresis. But again, I will tell you, these patients who have severe alcoholic hepatitis, not many of them tolerate this plasmapheresis well. Because in plasmapheresis, first of all, there is the issue of hypotension. And if sepsis is an important consideration, we have to see, and often these patients will have thrombocytopenia. So it's we can do when you are pushed to the wall, there is no other treatment possible, then you can think of plasmapheresis. But again, you should be very careful in selecting these patients for plasmapheresis. If someone has got a very high bilirubin and toxic effects of bilirubin is occurring, you can think of plasmapheresis, low volume plasmapheresis.
There's a question from Dr. Bharat Kumar. I think some people drink furniture polish, while some have started drinking sanitizer as both having alcohol content. So, any comments on that? About
that will be only in Gujarat, na? Because it's not available here. Otherwise, everywhere, why somebody will drink just sanitizer?
So, see, if someone is drinking sanitizers with 70% alcohol, I don't know what will happen, because the usual drinks are 40% spirits. Whiskey and rum is 40%. So with 40%, if you can develop this, with 70%, I think rather than you will wait for the liver to damage, first your stomach will go and your esophagus will burn. I think if someone drinks 70%.
We have a people drinking the spirit also in Gujarat.
Yeah, okay.
This is 90-95% of alcohol.
Yeah.
so there is a question from Dr. Jitendra Kumar. Why AST is more elevated than ALT in patients with ALCAP? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's like very important, like all our exam questions, like because for the manufacture of HGBT, this pyridoxal phosphate is required, which is deficient in alcoholic patients. So that's why AST is more than ALT.
Now, a patient has esophageal varices, which are large esophageal varices, never bled, and has presented you with ALCAP. Would you consider giving steroids to this patient? So this is a question from Dr. Amol.
Yeah, so Amol, I think he's my PGT. So he has been asking questions here. He's studying for his exam. Amol Satwane, right? Amol Satwane.
Yes.
Yeah, he's my PGT. Okay. So Amol, the thing is that if someone has got a large varices with high risk stigmata of bleed, you should be careful in giving steroids, because this patient can bleed. As I told you, GI bleed is a contraindication for steroids. But if someone has not bled, and you have to give steroids you can give steroids with careful monitoring. Keep the patient under your monitoring, because the advantage will be more than just waiting if someone can improve by steroid. So again, the data with steroid, as I showed you, it's not very robust. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, all meta-analysis. So you have to individualize, see the patient. And anyway, in my practice, in patients of alcoholic hepatitis whom I give steroids, I usually keep them in the hospital for at least 7 days. I don't give anyway right steroids and discharge them. At least for 7 days, I keep them in the hospital to monitor them, because they might deteriorate with steroids.
A question from Dr. Ravindra Gade. What is the role of metadoxin as of
See, that's what I showed. Metadoxin, there are not many studies. Again, it is an antioxidant like NAC. So as we know that all the pathogenesis of liver disease, be it NAFLD, ALD, there is all free radical injury. So if we give antioxidants, there is theoretically, as the question of glutathione, as the rule of N-acetylcysteine. So if we give these things, theoretically, there is a point that the free radicals will be less, the free radical scavenging will occur, and the patient might improve. So there I showed you that study where the metadoxin was found to be favorable in that study for maintenance of remission. Also, there are studies that I didn't mention where there was a metadoxin was combined with steroids. And there was an advantage, survival advantage in when it is compared with other groups. So we can give, it is an antioxidant, theoretically it should work.
The next question is from Dr. Jitendra Kumar. Baclofen. So what is the dose that you would consider using it and how long?
So baclofen usually for this condition, you have to give for prolonged periods, usually for 2 months, 3 months for de-addictions. Usually the dose that we give is 10 milligram twice daily. But again, you have to be careful because baclofen is a centrally acting drug, which sometimes makes the patients drowsy. So you have to be careful that the patient should not precipitate encephalopathy if someone has gotten already chronic liver disease. So if we want to give baclofen for de-addiction, it has to be given for prolonged periods. It has to be given usually for 2 to 3 months. The dose is 10 milligram twice daily.
So Dr. Smith is asking if there are any contraindications for pentoxifylline.
No. Pentoxifylline is a well-tolerated drug, not side effect. The only thing is not available. Like most of the place we don't get nowadays Trental. It is available by the name of Trental. Sometimes it just disappears from the market. But otherwise,
yeah, I think Sandeep, in our area it's very well available now. Earlier it was a shortage, maybe around an year back, but now it's really
okay. So Trental you can give, the not much side. It's a well-tolerated drug. It doesn't have much side effect. You can give, not a problem.
Are you actually using it?
Well, yeah, we give. When we have nothing to give, we give Trental.
Okay, so I think after STOPA trial, most of us
have stopped. Yes.
Yes. So how would you rule out infection? Because most of these patients are immunocompromised. This is again a question from Dr. Smith.
Yes. So see, infection is a very important thing to rule out if you are contemplating steroids in this group of patients. So usually before we still give steroids, usually we'll do a procal, we'll do a CRP, we'll do a urine culture, we'll do a blood culture. And of course the TC, because total count may be fallacious, as you know, because alcohol causes leukocytosis. Another thing is you can see is the neutrophil ratio. Neutrophils can be increased, so it can be misleading. Because in the liver biopsy specimens also, if you see, the way to differentiate between ASH and NASH is the neutrophilic infiltration. So that's why you have to do the other tests. Like if someone has got a sepsis, the procal may be high. The cultures you have to rule out negative before starting steroids.
So again, from the same Dr. Smith, the question is, there is no role for pentoxifylline. There are contraindications for steroids where you cannot give steroids, and transplant is not a possibility. Then how do you manage?
The novel medicine, novel drugs. That's why the novel drugs. They have nothing to give. You wait, abstinent. The patient has to be abstinent. The general measures, and if there is no harm, use NAC, use metadoxin, give albumin. All the general measurements you can give. G-CSF you can try. I don't think any harm. Though subsequent studies, it has not come in the recommendation yet. But again, Dr. Sarin's group has shown that the G-CSF works. Theoretically also it works. You can try. But again, with the problem with GSF is in whichever patient I have used, suddenly the total count becomes 44,000. The total count becomes 50,000 after giving G-CSF, and you don't know what to do then. So that is the problem. So, but still you can use. You can start.
One good message for the physician is liver transplant can be done early in alcoholic hepatitis also.
Yes.
Because
so if you have nothing to do, you have no drug to give, refer the patient for transplant.
Earlier we got the message that there should be abstinent period of 3 months, but now we can do liver transplant early also in severe alcoholic hepatitis basically.
Yeah, we can do. Only thing is, again, this patient should not go back to drinking, because I showed you one study where it has shown that if the patients are abstinent for some period of time, the response is better. Because these patients, if they are addicted, you give a precious liver, again they go back to drinking. So that is a problem.
most of this end up getting an LDLT. And if we
Yeah.
go through, means a lot of data had been presented in ILC this year, that the recidivation rate is not as high as it is expected. It is just 6 to 8%. So we should give him a try if they are actually, there is a good social support. So what matters is a good social support.
Yes, correct. So for cadaveric program, it is a problem because you don't want to risk a liver for that. But if someone is own relatives are giving, you can tell them everything and then go ahead.
There's question from Dr. Abhinav Gupta pertaining role of albumin in alcoholic hepatitis.
Yeah, same thing. Albumin has got, if the patient has got alcoholic liver disease, if the patient is decompensated cirrhosis of liver, if the patient has got kidney injury, or if the patient's serum albumin is low, generally albumin you can give, yeah, it has got good role. You can give albumin as a supplement. This all comes into general measures of any CLD patients.
So there's a question about N-acetylcysteine, like how would you give it? How long would you give it? And are there any studies which would support it?
Yeah, I showed you 1 or 2 studies where there was NAC was combined with steroids and it was given as infusion for 5 days. That normally what we give NAC in patients, so you can give it 1.2 gram for TDS for 5 days, or you can give it as an infusion. The studies are for 5 days they have showed in comparison in addition to steroids.
So treatment of severe tremors in ALCAP patient who is actually in a withdrawal. So I think they are asking about alcohol withdrawal in these patients.
Yeah, so these patients, usually we give this chlordiazepam epoxide and Librium and all this available for tremors and all. We usually refer to the psychiatrists. They usually come and give few sedatives. Sometimes lorazepam they give, clonazepam they give. So these are all treatment of withdrawal features. So the general measures of alcoholism, we have to see that the patient does not have Wernicke's encephalopathy, the patient should not have vitamin B1 deficiency. That is in our hand, we have to treat. And we have a severe alcohol withdrawal symptom, we give a referral to the psychiatrist. And from our end, if you want to start a drug, you can start Librium at a 25 milligram TDS, then slowly taper it off and give a nighttime dose. Only thing is it causes a lot of sedation. So should be according to the clinical status of the patient.
Just to add on to it, that in a patient who is chances of underlying cirrhosis, lorazepam is preferred over chlordiazepam epoxide. So you need to keep that in mind as well before giving that. So I think these are all the questions. One question from my side as well, like would you consider MADRS discriminant fraction as a cutoff for giving steroids, like above which you would be scared to give steroids? Yeah,
so this is a thing like usually 55, 56. So I have listened to the experts also, like of hepatologists. They usually say if the patient has got an MDF more than 55, 56, usually the outcome is very bad. So this group of patients, maybe we should refrain from giving steroids. So Dr. Jignesh and Dr. Harwani, if you would like to.
I think Pathik, you are here, so you can add on some knowledge which you have recently learned or pertaining to liver transplant or alcoholic hepatitis management.
I think I'll congratulate Dr. Sandeep for an excellent talk because he has stressed on some very important features, and I'll just reiterate the same what he has already conveyed, that whenever you see a patient who is presenting to your clinic with jaundice and you are suspecting alcoholic hepatitis in that patient, alcohol de-addiction and psychiatrist role is extremely important. We should always involve a psychiatrist because alcohol abstinence is the #1 management. Now, once we label them as alcoholic hepatitis and we assess the severity, if severity is less than 32, rather than prescribing them 10 or 12 drugs, it would be better that we should concentrate more on nutrition and sometimes even on nasogastric feeding, because less than 32, it is usually nutrition. For patients who have underlying shrunken liver or an MDF more than 55, we would be scared to give steroids, and we would start considering liver transplant for those patients. For a select group of patients who are MDF between 32 to 54, who are not having any contraindication in form of sepsis, renal failure, and an active GI bleed, we should consider giving them steroid trial. If we are giving them steroids, we should keep that in mind that the survival advantage is only for a month. It is not a prolonged survival. So it is the alcohol abstinence that is going to save them and not steroids. Steroid is just going to stabilize for a period of 4 weeks. And if they respond, it's good to continue the trial. But if they don't respond, then again, the liver transplant would become a management source. So eventuality for a non-cirrhotic severe ALCAP, a trial of steroid, if it succeeds, alcohol abstinence is the treatment. If it doesn't succeed, then it is the transplant. So this should be the summary of his talk. And there are a lot of new things which are coming up, and we would be optimistic about FMT, GCSF, as well as OCA, which our trials are going on. So let's hope if it changes the management.
Pathik, do you give GEM CSF in alcoholic hepatitis or ACLF patients?
Honestly, I've just tried it in one patient, and third day he developed sepsis, and the entire thing, we assume that he developed sepsis. I would say that procal high, white cells in 40s, and culture we were sent, but we didn't give it further.
Sandeep, what do you do? Do you give like
Yeah, we have, see, same thing. We have used, now not that we have not used. So we have used in few patients the same problem, because the patient deteriorates, you are unable to know like what is happening, whether the GCSF with a count of 40,000. So that dilemma, 1 or 2 patients we have completed. I think our DNBs are there. They always come up with ideas. They said, let's try this, let's try that. So we have used in a few patients. But if you ask me, so see the studies which are by Dr. Garg and all, they have showed that CD34 homing and it increases after treatment. So clinically, how much the patient improves and what, because see, from 2012 to 2018, still it is yet to come into practice. So if it was a drug which was very good and very thing, I think by these 7-8 years, this would have like come at least into the practice. And some outside studies, outside India studies, they have not shown very good results with this. So that is.
So I think Pathik, if nothing more to ask, we can thank Sandeep.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'll thank Dr. Sandeep for an excellent talk, and I summarized your talk, and thanks for clarifying, simplifying the management of alcoholic hepatitis and stressing on the importance factors about the novel therapies as well as therapies which have questionable benefit, and as well as the role of steroids and role of alcohol abstinence. So I'll hand over the session to Dr. Harwani to end the session.
At the end, I thank all audiences who have joined today, and I thank Sandeep, Pathik, and Jignesh, all of you. It was a very nice session, very decent talk by Sandeep. It was very clear message. Once again, thank you, Sandeep, for accepting our invitation, and I thank Jignesh bhai as well as Pathik to join us today. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.